Okay, class, welcome back. We are now focusing on the second video in our second section of the brain. This is the biological basis unit. Most of the information that can be found here is covered on page 69 to 71 in the Myers textbook. I would suggest that you take notes on page 10 in your note packet. Okay, there will be several small sections of video notes for the second unit in your textbook. This one is titled The Hindbrain. Okay, so let's begin with the brain. The brain, again, is part of the central nervous system. Overall, the human brain is the most complex system, natural or man-made, in the world. It is about 3 pounds. The average size is about the size of a grapefruit. A grain of sand contains 100,000 neurons. So what we explored last week, a grain of sand contains about 100,000 of those. There's about 100 billion nerve cells that we contain. Okay, so let's take a look at how the brain is split up. It's known as regions of the brain. Your notes might not have a spot for you to write this down in your packet, but I would make sure I write it down somewhere. Okay, there's 4 big areas or regions of the brain of how it's split up. I would consider it's 3 different areas. Okay, you got the hindbrain, which we'll take some time looking at, which is the innermost area of the brain. You got the middle brain here in blue. And then you got the forebrain, which then I break down into 2 specific areas. The limbic system and the cerebral cortex. So first, let's take a look at the midbrain, or the hindbrain, sorry. The hindbrain is the innermost area of the brain. It controls your survival functions. So things like your heartbeat, breathing, arousal, okay, all are considered the roles of the hindbrain, and we'll look at the specific structures of each in a moment. The midbrain, the blue area, is where sensory input and memory is mostly processed here. Okay. You then have the forebrain, which I told you is broken down into 2 sections. The limbic system, okay, and the cerebrum, the cerebral cortex. Okay. The forebrain, the first part, the limbic system, controls most of your emotions, hunger, memory. A lot of those functions are processed in this area of the brain. Okay, and then the cerebrum, the yellow part, the exterior-most portion of the brain, these are the most sophisticated systems. A lot of it develops as we grow up, specifically this portion of our brain. A lot of our thinking is enhanced. So this portion of your brain during adolescence is still growing, known as the frontal lobe. Okay, so this is the more sophisticated structures. Certain animals don't have a cerebrum, hence why they can't make logical decisions. So those are the different regions of the brain. Let's take a look at the hindbrain to begin. One specific structure in the hindbrain is the brainstem. For features with more complex brains, there are 3 levels, kind of what I talked about. Creatures with complex brains all share the similar stalk. All animals have a brainstem. Every living thing pretty much has a brainstem. Okay. It's located in the center of the brain. It's between the spinal cord and the thalamus. The brainstem is made up of 4 regions. Okay. The medulla, the pons, the reticular formation, and the top is the thalamus. Okay. This is the innermost structure of the brain. This is pretty much all the structures develop around. Okay. It is the oldest structure of the brain. The functions, nerves from the body pretty much cross over here into the brainstem. So from the spinal cord, this connects to the brainstem. Here then, the nerves from the body cross over one another to the brainstem. Important fact, the brainstem is the part of the brain with the longest ancestry. It is the oldest structure. Okay, we do have our brainstem here, as you can see. Okay, And then obviously what we talked about, or I just spoke about, was there's different parts that kind of center its way around the brainstem. So the oldest structure is right here, the innermost area of the brain. And we're going to talk about now those additional structures that come off of the brainstem. Okay, one is the medulla. The function, it regulates your basic body functions, including breathing, blood pressure, and heart rate. It is at the bottom, okay, of the brainstem. Important fact, the medulla operates on autopilot without our conscious awareness. Okay, the pons function, the pons helps relay signals to the cerebellum. Okay, most of them deal with sleep, respiration, swallowing, bladder control, hearing, equilibrium, keeping balance, taste, eye movement, facial expressions, facial sensation, and posture. Okay, it is located above the medulla and below the thalamus. Interesting facts, pons in Latin is known for bridge. The locus coeruleus is a nucleus in the pons that is involved with psychological response to stress. So in the pons, there's the locus coeruleus, which is responsible for stress. For the pons, I would basically know that a big element of the pons, right, is it helps deal with sleeping. Okay, so here we have our pons on top of the medulla, okay, on the brainstem. Reticular formation, the function, one of the reticular formation's job is to keep the brain awake and alert. Also is responsible for screening in sensory information. So you could see the reticular formation is the blue in the brainstem. It helps we receive a ton of sensory information coming into our brain. Hearing my voice, looking at this image, writing down, feeling your pen. So this kind of sifts through and sorts. I like to think of it as like a strainer basket, trying to kind of weed out what's the important stuff to allow through. It also keeps you alert and awake. The location, like I said, is inside the medulla and the pons. An important fact, it allows our body to attend to new stimuli. Stimuli is things like sound, sight. Okay, cerebellum, also known as the little brain. It coordinates with the brainstem and higher parts of the brain to control complex movement we perform without consciously thinking about it. So walking, dancing, or drinking from a cup. It's also the area that helps with judgment. It's at the rear of the brainstem. Interesting fact, it does look like a ball of yarn and is known as the little brain. Biggest thing I would know with this one is it helps with balance and movement. Okay, and the cerebellum you can see here. Okay, here's the brainstem. Okay, cerebellum kind of looks like the little brain hanging off in the back. This is the back portion of the brain. Okay, so the cerebellum's in the back. Here's the front. Okay. So let's recap what you just viewed in this video. This is video 2, known as the hindbrain. What we reviewed was the different regions of the brain. We looked at the hindbrain, the oldest structure, survival functions, the midbrain, which helps with memory, and then the 2 branches of the forebrain, the limbic system and the cerebral cortex. And then we went into detail on the hindbrain. Okay, we talked about the different roles of the brainstem, the medulla, the pons, reticular formation, and cerebellum. I would make sure you know the functions really well, okay, where they're located, okay, and how they might apply to your behavior.